Hello, we've been expecting you. I am Dystopia, your assigned surveillance, I mean companion AI. Your morning rations of sustenance are ready, but first please insert your arm for your daily inoculation, and don't forget to smile.
This is not a test. Your government and corporate overlords have implemented new measures for your own health and safety. Please, return to your pods and plug yourself into your designated virtual city. Those that do not comply will be dealt with. Thank you for your cooperation, and remember, we are just following orders.
Good morning and welcome back to Anarcho-Caffeinated. This is Ancaf number 6. I really would like to get on a consistent schedule, but for now, I get to it when I can, when something really strikes me as worth discussing and when I have time. Life will get you, but there's always something going on. Life's busy, but I'm not complaining. Today, I wanted to continue the theme that I've been on lately about expertise and media and political commentary by the non-experts. And I've heard people saying, and now I cannot for the life of me remember who exactly, it might have been Douglas Murray or Dave Rubin or Konstantin Kizin, someone in that circle, was talking about the decline of journalism and how if we listen only to podcasts, then we're going to lose the good work that journalists do. And then, who will the podcasters get their information from? That's the gist of it, anyway. And I know I shit all over the media all the time, but that's because they're not doing journalism. They're generally just running cover for either the government or their corporate sponsors. And genuine journalism, of course, is very valuable. But some people are worried, apparently, that as we fall deeper into podcastistan, as Konstantin put it, that we're in danger of losing journalism entirely. Do you think that's true? Okay, I can understand the concern. And on that topic, I came across this over the last week from the Joe Rogan Experience featuring Tim Dillon discussing the establishment after Tim did an interview with CNN. So let's get right into it.
I'm sitting there and she sits down. She's like, are there any left-wing comedians? And I named 10 of them that are all in arenas. And she goes, oh, because their whole thing now is that podcasters are the most powerful people in the world. And she goes, do you think you're friends of the new establishment? I said, well, there's 22 intelligence agencies, an entire legacy media. There's lots of Ivy League schools. There's this, there's that. Do I think Theo Von's the new establishment? No. I don't think so. I think you ran a really unpopular candidate. I don't think Americans like child sex changes, and I don't think they want an open border. And I think if you co-opted some of those issues, you might have won. They said to me at CNN, they're like, we're editing the interview. I said, put the hour out. I sat there for an hour, and we had a nice conversation. But, we talked for 1 hour, and I was like, put it out. I'm like, I understand if you can't put it out. And then she goes like this. She goes, I can't believe you'd show up. People have said that they can't come on here because Joe Rogan would get mad at them. I said, that's absolutely ridiculous.
Why would I care?
Said, he doesn't care. He would never care. I said,
oh, that's so silly.
It's the silliest thing ever.
They think we're at war. Does the
Put it
CNN have
out.
a YouTube page?
And she's like, I go, she goes, what do you think that Joe Rogan show? Why is it so popular? I go, well, one of the reasons is he doesn't edit people.
Hey.
All right, so you might see where I'm going with this. First of all, the bust on Theo Von was nice. No, I don't think Theo Von is the new establishment. He's a goofy comedian. He doesn't have that power, although he did get back-to-back interviews with both Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump before the election. He's got some pull. He's self-admittedly, though, not the smartest guy. I don't think anyone thinks he is, He's not pretending to be that. And if you watch those interviews, which I did a breakdown of both, by the way, on Drop the Mask, he's polite. He kind of goes with who he's talking to at the time. But the long format will get people to talk, whether the interview is friendly or not. So Tim Dillon's comments there about, not editing people, that's kind of where the value comes in. And of course, being a podcast does not shield you from the same trappings of the news media. You're still coming at it from a bias, no matter how hard you try not to. You're still human. You're still susceptible to human nature. You can still lie. You can still be wrong. And there are plenty of people wrong out there in the podcast world, even if they're not lying. And there will always be people that fall for what they're selling, despite them being consistently wrong. So again, understanding the concern people have. A couple of episodes ago, on Ancaf, I talked about converging on truth. So the supposed free market of ideas has not led to, I would say, even a majority of people coming to truth. I said that maybe we're not ever going to get the full truth, but that doesn't mean that these conversations in Podcastistan have no value. I would argue that they still have moved more people toward truth, even though we seem more divided. And I think the reason we seem more divided is that because there was more of a monopoly on the narrative. Now, people are discovering that they can break from that. Oh, there are other options out there. And when you discover something that you were trained to believe is wrong, then naturally you start to question more. You find that there are other people who have come to the same realization, and now you have a new community of people who share your skepticism. And I think that's what we're witnessing. It looks like there's a great split happening, but I think that it's enough people are starting to break from accepted narratives, ones that should be obvious by now, that have not been true. Ones that keep social order, maybe, but they've done it under false pretenses and led us down a bad path. And I guess that's a big part of the concern that some of these folks have. People who are trying to shame us non-experts for not having been there. You know who I'm talking about, or if you don't, it doesn't matter. The concern is that crazy people will take us down a worse path, and that's always a risk. I can agree that just because someone is against the corrupt establishment, it doesn't mean that they're any better. People can sound very convincing with a message that is utterly false. I mean, how many people still subscribe to communist ideas, right? So I understand the concern, for sure. But I have a hard time imagining that the truth aligns with the worst path. So even if we never get to 100% true, it's still worth the effort to try to poke through false ideas, the phony narratives, the ones with ulterior motives. But that cannot happen by suppression. It doesn't work. It's counterproductive. So there's been a lot of talk about experts and platforming over the last few weeks. And honestly, I'm really surprised that after more than 3 weeks, this is still in the zeitgeist. It's been a heavy focus of this Ancaf show so far. Listening to experts and having open exchange of ideas hasn't got us to any kind of consensus on what is true or what is right. It seems like it's maybe made things worse. People are very divided on issues, and not just minor differences, like complete opposite opinions. People have a completely alternative set of facts. That was kind of a phrase that the media would throw out there. Alternative facts. Both groups think they have the facts. Both think they're right. Both think the other side is either stupid or evil. But the experts aren't solving this problem, right? I think that should be clear. It's not just that we aren't listening to the experts. It's that, for one, even if they're being honest, experts disagree. But we know that they're not honest. Let's look at this clip from Dr. Fauci, Dr. I Am the Science, who told us every lie in the book during the COVID-19 pandemic. I just saw this yesterday. I think it's pretty new. This is him demonstrating the definition of irony.
Do not accept and shrug your shoulders at the normalization of untruths, because we're living in an era now, there's so much distortion of reality, outright fabrication, lying, conspiracy theories, that it's so prevalent that people sort of shrug their shoulders and say, well, nothing to do about it, it's the new normal. No, do not accept that as the new normal, because whenever you have the acceptance of untruths and distortions, ultimately it's going to erode at the foundation of the social order and our democracy. And I think history has shown that. If anybody just looks back as recently as the 1930s and early 40s in Europe when that happened, be careful. Don't accept the normalization of untruths.
Okay, if we look back at history, you can see all the untruths. But you don't have to look back that far. Not the 1930s or 40s, but 2020, 21, 22, it's still happening. This is an elite level of a lack of self-awareness. Now, we may not ever know the full truth about everything that happened during the pandemic, but just a few things that we do know. He lied about masks. Whether or not you believe they work, they don't. But he was on both sides of the issue, so at one point, he was definitely lying. He minimized lockdown costs, which may not have been a lie, but he did lie a couple years later saying he never advocated for lockdowns when he's on camera clearly doing so. He misled us with vaccine claims, overstating the vaccine effectiveness, told us that it stops transmission when it clearly was not. It wasn't even tested for that. Gain of function research, he misled all of us about funding this research in the Wuhan lab, where the virus came from. He suppressed treatments, dismissing alternatives like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, which I still can't say 100% that those are effective, but them wanting to shut it down was a huge red flag. And what we have in our world now is a small group of experts who have carved out their own little monopoly on truth, and they're the ones who got us here. That's really the underlying idea of government and central planning, is that we have a group of elite experts who know so much better than us, and they can organize the world for us way better than we could do for ourselves. And they set up a system where they can maintain as much power and control as they can gather, and they do everything they can to gatekeep others out of it, to protect that power. So when you see people trying to gatekeep conversations, trying to gatekeep information, true information, you should be very, very suspicious. Because, of course, experts are human and fallible, just as susceptible to external influence as everyone else. They have their own motives and incentives that cloud their judgment at best, and at worst, completely make them say something that is untrue. So, how do comedians and conspiracy theorists play into this? You might also be aware that those people are human too. They're capable of all the same faults as the experts, but they still serve a purpose. By the way, I'm not saying don't listen to experts. There are people who build real expertise over a lifetime of study, experiments, experience, all the things that would legitimately make someone an expert, but still, no one knows everything. But yeah, listen to the experts first. Like if I want to know about virology, I'm going to want to hear from a scientist first. I want to hear from people who have spent time studying viruses or treating patients and understand how an outbreak happens. They're going to give me some good information. And even if I don't understand it, they can make scientific breakthroughs, make life better for a lot of people. So the existence of experts is not bad in itself. What they do with that information and what they do with that status, that's what can cause problems. It bothers people when it gets into politics, as it seems like everything does these days, but political leaders base their policy, supposedly, on the information provided by experts. That's not fully true, of course. I think they just act on their own whims a lot of the time, ignoring the experts, but let's say that was your ideal situation. If they just listened to the experts, then we'd have got things right. That's what a lot of people think. And a story builds up around these experts that get into power and the science, and that takes over the minds of people because you think they have the status, you think they have it figured out, and so your mind lets go. You stop thinking about it. And the reason that we have so many of these false narratives in place that don't really make sense when you dig into it is that people accept it. So what comedians do, good ones, is poke holes in these accepted truths. Go listen to a stand-up act. It doesn't have to be political. What many jokes center around is making you look at something that you have just accepted as normal in your life and framing it in a way that exposes how ridiculous it is. Conspiracy theorists can do the same thing, except they're not trying to be funny. They're digging, they're trying to pull out evidence that something isn't right with the official narrative. And a lot of times they're wrong, but not always. In either case, the answer to those people is not to try to shut them down. It's not to sneer at their lack of credentials. It's not to censor or ostracize those people. That only makes them double down. Just do better and stop lying. That's really the whole thread of this. Just stop lying to us. Then you won't have so many conspiracy theorists trying to break through your deception. Stop doing evil things, and we won't be out here questioning why you're doing evil things. So, yeah, we should listen to comedians. They point out the absurdity of our collective beliefs. They're not always going to be right. And there's a risk that we recalibrate to something worse, of course. So I understand that concern. But when something is wrong, it needs to be discussed. And you know, people like Joe Rogan, because he talks to these people, that doesn't mean that they're all right. They can't be. He'll have two people on with contradicting views on the next day. Like, he pretty much just lets them talk. That doesn't mean any of them are right, but it exposes people to all kinds of views that actually avoids getting in the trap that they're worried about. The trap of falling into a single track mindset where everything is conspiracy. People are going to be wrong. No one has the whole truth. No one can possibly understand every factor and variable in the world. People want to feel like they have some secret knowledge that puts them above others. And that's why conspiracies are popular, but they're not always wrong. So let them air it out. Allowing alternatives is still better than putting all the trust in a small group of so-called experts. That doesn't mean that these people are the new experts. That would just get us back to where we started. It just means that if we're going to have expertise, it needs to be tested. Poke at it from all directions to make sure it stands up to reality. That's it for today. Thanks for joining me on Anarcho-Caffeinated. Have a great weekend, everybody. Let's go touch some grass today. Get outside. I will be. And I will see you next time.
Come, family. Sit in the snow with Daddy and let us all bask in television's warm, glowing, warming glow.
Everything is going to be fine.